Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com, on Roku, Dwyer Boxing and Sports News. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Moments ago, I got a message that someone had asked me a question on my Twitter account. I'll even name the guy, Jack Rathborn. I correspond with Jack from time to time. He's a hardcore boxing fan. And he asked me a question I'd seen before in a video just in passing. I mentioned that I thought Leo Santa Cruz would beat Guillermo Rigondeaux. There's some hardcore people here online who believe Rigondeaux is bulletproof, or Rigondeaux, however you want to pronounce it. Right? They believe he's bulletproof. I myself just made a video yesterday or maybe the day before where I put him among the top 8 pound for pound in the sport of boxing. He's an excellent boxer. Right? No question about it. He's one of the best. I feel he's a defensive master. But people need to realize that styles make fights. Right? Everyone seems to believe that Leo Santa Cruz has been protected. I don't know who wins Santa Cruz's next fight against Abner Maris, because both of those guys can go faster than 55 miles an hour in terms of tempo. But I have my doubts. Whether a selective, overly selective counterpuncher like Guillermo Rigondeaux will be able to deal with a young lion who's as high volume, who throws as many different kinds of punches, both up top and down low, who's fearless, right? Who's willing to step in to crossfire, right? Like Leo Santa Cruz. I think Santa Cruz gives Rigondeaux all he can handle. I think the boxing hardcore seems to believe more in Rigondeaux's invincibility than they should. Understand, Rigondeaux has a great style when the fight is even keel, right? When it doesn't really vacillate that much, right? When the pacing is repetitious. I don't think a selective counterpuncher like him will know what to do against a high-volume opponent with two hands. Please don't mention the Mayweather-Manny Pacquiao fight to me. Pacquiao's predominantly one-handed. He's predominantly left-handed. Right? Santa Cruz is completely different. He's two-handed. He's not just throwing straight punches. He's throwing looping punches. He varies the punch. Right? And so, of course I'd get a phone call right now. Give me a moment. We'll just let the phone ring a little bit. And so my point's simply this. Don't ignore the styles. Rigondeaux, by the way, fought Dwyer 4 fights ago. He's only had 3 fights since fighting Dwyer. What I want you to do is to look at Dwyer's volume. Understand, Nonito Dwyer used to have higher volume than he does now. Right? Look at his fight against Matthew Bula. Look at the CompuBox numbers. You're going to see that Dwyer's volume had dropped rapidly. Right? I would argue that Nonito Dwyer today isn't the fighter he once was. Right? It's a tough sport. Guys get worn out. No question about it. So, tell me what the Rigondeaux win was against a high-volume fighter who actually pushed it. I thought Agbeko was a bit too tentative against him. Also, think about this. To those of you who believe Rigondeaux is bulletproof. He was down twice in his last fight. Wasn't he down against Nonito Donaire? That means Rigondeaux has hit the canvas in 2 of his last 4 fights. As good as his defense is, he can get hurt. He can get dazed. We can argue. Many of you will say that it was a flash knockdown. Okay, fair enough. Right? My point is, he's getting dropped by lower volume guys than Leo Santa Cruz. Let's flip the script a little bit. Talk about another highly regarded, who in my opinion is also at risk of losing to a certain type of fighter.
Now, many of you disagree with me here. I don't have to try to be controversial. Many of you disagree with me here, but when I saw the first Tony Thompson, Vladimir Klitschko fight, and keep in mind, Tony could barely move that night. I believe Tom knows in his heart to this day that he should have beaten the champ that day. Right? Tony gave away the belt. I know many of you disagree. I believe Emmanuel in Klitschko's owner understood that his guy was giving away rounds, and it was structural. In other words, he wasn't having a bad night. He was having a bad time because of his style. Understand, Vladimir Klitschko is robotic. Right? Very robotic. Tyson Fury says so in every press conference. Klitschko's style is really entrenched. He's not going to change anytime soon. Right? He has a great short left up front. That doesn't work against a southpaw, does it? Right? He has a great jab. Those jabs don't land the same way against a southpaw, do they? Right? He's a cautious fighter. I'll agree. Straight right hands wreak havoc against southpaws. Is Vladimir Klitschko the kind of guy who is comfortable throwing a lot of straight right hands against a guy he hasn't fought before? He throws a lot of straight right hands against Tony Thompson in the rematch after, in my opinion, he loses the first round. Then he gets out of his shell. But understand, Tony was someone who he knew because it was the second time they fought. So, I do feel Tyson Fury beats Vladimir Klitschko. I've made a video already. To those of you who say, Dwyer, when are you going to make the video? Just Google it. It's up. I'm taking Tyson Fury in that fight. Of course, since Klitschko has a punch, I'm hedging the play with Klitschko by KO. I should get pretty good odds because understand, Tyson Fury the last time I checked was at least a 3-1 underdog in the fight. I don't think that fight is close. I believe 80% of Tyson Fury beats 100% of Vladimir Klitschko. Right? Tyson Fury could always beat himself that night. We've seen that happen. Fighters overheating, getting too full of themselves. That happened to Vladimir Klitschko against Layman Brewster at their first fight. But if Tyson Fury comes out southpaw, right, and is determined to be on his front foot while maintaining distance behind a jab, I'm expecting Vladimir Klitschko to fall apart. Right? Now let's talk about another fighter who I believe could beat Vladimir Klitschko. I was quietly watching this guy's comeback. Right? But there is a question, since this guy did fail a drug test and did look awfully sluggish, right, in a different fight. There is a question on exactly how real the guy's performance is. Right? And that's Antonio Tarver.
Understand the Tarver who beat Danny Green in a cruiserweight classic. That was a great fight. That Tarver, in my opinion, would beat Vladimir Klitschko. Right? Now, Tarver would later fail a drug test down the road. Right? There's a question about exactly, whether or not he was enhanced when he fought Danny Green. But understand, Tarver is a southpaw who, when he's on his game, moves. Right? I'm not talking about the Tarver who lost to Hopkins, right? Who was dead from making a Rocky movie. I'm talking about the Tarver who fought Danny Green. If you want to know the kind of fighter who, in my opinion, can beat Vladimir Klitschko, who I personally consider to be one of the best in boxing, just like I consider Guillermo Rigondeaux to be one of the best in boxing. Right? Look at Tarver's style. Right? I think Fury, who's a master. Right? When you see a guy who's able to switch and do so with a jab. Right? I believe there's only two guys in boxing. I know a lot of guys switch. But I believe there are only two guys in boxing who could switch and pull it off from long distance. Right? I don't believe James DeGale's one of them. Right? Other guys switch. Right? I don't believe Andre Durrell is one of them. I don't believe Danny Jacobs is one of them. He switches too. I believe the only two guys in boxing who can switch from distance and pump the other hand's jab and have it all work and have the defense in place are Tyson Fury and Terence Crawford. I don't think Vladimir Klitschko is going to know what to do. Likewise, right, when Fury goes southpaw, right, sticks a right jab in his face and is able to move around the ring knowing that depending on the angle, he could switch to orthodox and completely throw off a pre-programmed fighter like Vladimir Klitschko, who's not fluid. Likewise, I don't know how Guillermo Rigondeaux copes with Leo Santa Cruz when Santa Cruz comes inside, starts throwing uppercuts. Rigondeaux can block the first part of the combination. But what happens if Santa Cruz continues with the combination? What happens if the punches aren't pot shots, but are actually 4, 5, 6 punch combinations? Right? This is the age-old question in boxing, talking about the greats, on whether or not Floyd Mayweather would know how to deal. Right? Mayweather's a selective counterpuncher, just like Rigondeaux. Whether Floyd Mayweather would know how to deal with Sugar Ray Leonard. Right? Because when Ray Leonard was on his game, folks, he was a combination puncher. Let me tell you, I encourage people to look at really footage that has to be seen. The last 3 rounds of Ray Leonard against Thomas the Hitman Hearns, the first fight. The one Ray won. Right? If Santa Cruz brings that kind of volume to the table, I'm telling you, Rigondeaux, in my opinion, will fall apart. Right? This is a guy who's been down multiple times. Right? I don't think if someone comes in with twice the volume of Denier, or let's say 80, put it this way, if he comes in with at least 50% more volume than Denier, and his front foot heavy throwing combinations, that's going to take a counterpuncher who's looking to block and counter out of his game plan. Boxing, at the end of the day, is rock, paper, scissors. You can't look at a guy who's a master in one discipline and think that he necessarily dominates everyone. Right? So, let's get back to Tarver. Tarver's fighting Steve Cunningham. It's a must-watch fight. It's coming up. I don't know who wins the fight. In part because the guys are older. Right? I don't know, whether Tarver's in Antonio Tarver level shape. Right? Is he in the shape that he was in when he beat Roy Jones? Think about it. The second Jones fight, that's a KO. Okay. Anyone can land a lucky punch. The third Jones fight is a methodical beatdown. That's prime Tarver. Right? The question is, at an older age now, is Tarver keeping himself in prime Tarver shape? Understand, between these two guys, in my opinion, Tarver and Cunningham, right? And both are interesting for different reasons. But Tarver is the one with the much higher upside. Because, let's say Vladimir Klitschko beats Tyson Fury, gets in a lucky punch, right? Gets a KO. By the way, that's the only way I think Vladimir Klitschko can beat him. I know the fight's in Germany, right? Let's say Tyson Fury gets caught. Tyson Fury was on the canvas, after all, against Steve Cunningham, right? It's happened before. Let's say Fury gets caught. I'm telling you that Klitschko's still going to have a problem with southpaws. Right? He's not going to be able to deal with Antonio Tarver. If Tarver beats Cunningham, that's a great fight. That's a great fight. Let me say this too. Of course, I would take Tarver. Let me say, of course, I'd take Tarver over Deontay Wilder. Right? Because in my opinion, Wilder's still green. Right? Tarver's a finished product. Right? Tarver's been a finished product for years. Right? Now let's do it the reverse. Let's say Tyson Fury beats Vladimir Klitschko, which is what I expect to happen. Well, understand, Tyson Fury going southpaw isn't going to faze Antonio Tarver. Right? I know many of you are going to say, who has Tarver fought at heavyweight? Right? I'll agree. But understand, Tarver's been draining himself for years to make weight. You just saw Danny Garcia fight at 147. Look good. Look certainly better than I thought he was going to look. Right? By the way, Garcia by KO. The hedge held there, but okay, whatever. Right? But, right, Garcia himself after the fight said, hey, I feel a lot better than I did after some recent fights at 140. Right? Because he didn't have to drain himself those 7 pounds. Right? Antonio Tarver at heavyweight might be rejuvenated. Understand, a day's not a day in boxing. Heavyweights age more slowly than other weight classes. That's why Vladimir Klitschko's still a dominant champion, and he's what, in his late 30s. Right? His brother walked away from the sport at something like 40. Right? So pay close attention to that Cunningham-Tarver fight. I don't know who wins it. I mean, I'm seriously, flip a coin. That's the way I look at that fight. I'm going to, look at that fight and have notes, that I could write to learn from that fight. But the point is, if Tarver wins that fight, then he's a major threat for whoever wins. Right? Whoever wins. Fury, Klitschko. Why? Because styles make fights. Because you can't, there isn't some absolute ranking order. Right? We could talk about the top 10 and stuff like that, but really, different guys are going to lose to different styles. Right? I don't think Vladimir Klitschko handles lefties well. I'm curious to see what happens to Tyson Fury if he's in against a world-class lefty. Right? I don't think Guillermo Rigondeaux, as good as he is, would handle sustained volume from a real combination puncher. Not some guy lifting his volume for that fight. No, but a guy who's accustomed to having high volume and who's accustomed to throwing punches in bunches, both up and down, and who has some adaptive reactiveness, where he can see that, okay, an uppercut's landing, I'm going to come in now with more uppercuts, but I'm going to fold it into combinations. Right? So, let me leave you with this thought. I personally believe Abner Maris is a more dangerous opponent for Leo Santa Cruz than Guillermo Rigondeaux would be. Because Abner Maris himself has been in big-time battles, high volume, front foot. Right? Styles make fights. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Just understand, Rigondeaux in his 30s, well into his 30s, got dropped twice in his last fight. Let's go one step further. Right? Everyone's talking about Rigondeaux like he's, a dragon slayer. Right? He had 3 consecutive fights go the distance. Then in his last 2 fights, he gets a KO in the first round. I encourage you to go back and look at that film. That KO, a little bit cloudy, right? Referee, not the best. Then his last fight, he has to get off the canvas to win that fight in the 11th round. He has great skills, let me tell you. I don't believe any man is unbeatable. Even these great unbeaten fighters, right? Floyd Mayweather, you can go back to the first Castillo fight. He had problems, right? I'm telling you, you research Rocky Marciano, you're going to hear about a guy named Roland Lastarza. That first fight, many in press row thought Rocky Marciano lost that fight, right? Look at the Marciano Jersey Joe Walcott clips. Walcott's dominating Marciano when they meet. Then Marciano knocks him out. We immediately forget about the first, 12 rounds of that fight. Right? So just food for thought. I personally believe no one's unbeatable. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Even the great Ricardo Lopez had a draw. Look it up. Thanks for stopping by.